Arsenal win back possession, and it's broken nicely to Cazorla, 30 metres from goal, plays it to the edge of the area. Alexis Sanchez goes for goal and scores. That's a brilliant goal from Alexis Sanchez. He's been Arsenal's star man this season, and maybe now they're going to get the right.
Hello and welcome to Gooners in the USA podcast. Mike, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Is it a good afternoon? It's a
fair afternoon.
It's fair.
We woke up this morning.
Yes, we did. That's always a good start.
It's a good start.
Always a good start. And we are happy to introduce a fantastic guest today. Do you mind if I run right into it?
Go ahead. I know the two of you have man crushes with each other.
Well, we have a lot in common, it turns out. But, yeah, he is one of the hosts of our beloved Bergkamp Wonderland podcast. He has hosted both their post-game ABW radio show, which is a great live look at the game having just happened, raw emotions and whatnot, and also appears on their weekly Thursday night podcast. He hosts another football podcast called The Football Hipsters, which takes a super deep dive into all levels of British football, as well as coverage of a lot of the other main leagues in Europe. And he is among my newest favorite people because he can mix together one of my favorite passions, which is Arsenal, with one of my guilty pleasures, which is laughing at silly men in tights running around screaming at people in the WWE. So, and it's even more exciting because it drives Andy absolutely crazy. He is Andy's second favorite Kris, at least he should be. Welcome to the podcast, Kris Carpenter.
Thank you very much for having me. And I have to say at this point, I am the most average there is, the most average there was, and the most average there ever will be.
See, I get that reference.
It's a good start.
Oh, I think you get more of the references than you let on that you get, but you have to maintain your little reputation amongst your friends. So we'll let you go on that. Andy, we have a special treat because Kris is so used to hosting podcasts that he doesn't know this, but we're just assuming that he would host this one. So we're just going to kick back and let him run the show.
Yeah, and over to you.
Good luck with that one.
So Kris, actually, we're not going to do that. But how did you get linked up with those crazy cast of characters over there? When did that start?
Well, that's going back a bit. I must have been doing it for about. It's got to be 2 years now. I'd have to look it up. I bet Danny would have he'd have a spreadsheet with all the dates we joined. No, I joined Twitter almost reluctantly because I used to be one of those Facebook people, and I joined Twitter to. I know. I joined Twitter to sort of just interact with some Arsenal fans really, and to start with, I did that thing everybody does where you follow all the big accounts and you try and tweet people that are famous and they never tweet you back, and I felt a bit kind of sad for myself.
Oh, I've never heard of doing that. I would never have known to do that. We don't do that. What are you saying?
How are Wendy's with the sponsorship?
You know,
that's not gone so well.
Yeah, that bitch has not called us back yet.
If there's any consolation,
Andy's good at burning bridges as quickly as possible when it doesn't go his way.
Yeah, we're still waiting for the check from Burger King for the hipsters, so it's all good. I get you. But yeah, I mean, it was one of those things. I joined Twitter. I think I got chatting to. I think I followed Danny and Gimli because I'd heard the podcast before. And I think, from memory, going back, I think I debuted on the Transfer Deadline podcast all that time ago, and from that. It was very quickly sort of established that I'd like to do a bit more and that I had a bit of a knowledge. And when we all had our own roles, like Dom with the injuries and Fifey with the finance and that, I was kind of that geek that watched lots of games across Europe. So that was my my kind of in. And then I've never looked back since. And then, of course, we developed ABW Radio. And now I'm kind of one of the more regular members now, one of the longer term people. So it's good fun, and Gimli and Danny do a wonderful job, and it's great that they can inspire people like yourselves to have your own. So it's good fun.
Yeah, there's no question that was a huge part in giving Andy the idea of accosting me and getting started on this thing. So
it's nice too that they're just openly, genuinely nice individuals too. There's no, well, everyone should listen to only our podcast, and that's one thing I think Mike and I have been a little bit surprised about, which is how open everyone is to say, yeah, you should listen to theirs and listen to ours and then come on as a guest. And so it's nice.
let's face it, our target audience are people that that have 4 hours a day of work, and then the other 20 hours they listen to podcasts. So I mean, there's room enough for all of us, I think. In there.
I'll have you know, I listen to currently on my podcast list. I've got 42 podcasts I download a week, and I think about 12 of them are football related. I think 9 of those are Arsenal related, and then there's a little bit of films, a bit of WWE, a bit of aliens, and a bit of sci-fi involved. And yeah, it's a great medium because you can sneak a earphone in your ear at work, especially when you've got long hair like I have, and yeah, you can take in information all day and all night. It's great fun.
I'm at 8. I just counted. I'm at 8.
I'm at 1.
Hey, there's room for growth.
Yes.
But we've always me too. We've always promoted other podcasts just because we don't believe in the whole well, we're better than you, we're bigger than you kind of thing, and ultimately it's a good way to be. There are some podcasts I'm not a massive fan of. I'll say that much. But ultimately, we all love the same club, and it seems silly to slate others too much. There are some that deserve it, I should say. But no, it's good fun, and we like promoting people like yourselves that are.
It's all right, blood.
Get on, fam. Yeah, it's great.
Well, and you guys have been just wonderful to us. I mean, we can't tell you how much. I mean, we were just kind of putting on we used to joke that we did our podcast for our moms, and that was pretty much it. And then one day Danny mentions us on your podcast, and all of a sudden our listens just kind of spiked, and it's just all of you have just continued to be so nice. And not to make this too much of an ass kissing fest, but we do appreciate it, and that is the Gooner spirit on display right there.
Mm-hmm. Happy to be here. It's all good.
Great.
Fantastic. So have you visited the U.S.? Have you ever ventured overseas to our neck of the woods?
No, it's on the bucket list. I've done Australia, and I've done quite a few European trips. I've done a few Arsenal away games in Europe as well. But no, I have never graced America. I have two part of the Hipsters pod actually, Kat and Var, who are a couple based in Chicago. They've said to me if I can ever get on a flight, I will. I'll have free food and free bed for as long as I want. So it's definitely on the bucket list. But
yeah. You'll have no shortage of people welcoming you into their homes and their pubs and their arms.
I'd love to do it, and I'm a huge fan I'm a big shark guy, so I know there's a lot of amazing aquariums in the US. So that's something I very much want to do as well. And Texas is my other weird bucket list place I want to go to. Don't know why, just do. So.
You have probably 20 crazy people in San Antonio that would probably show you a good time.
Yeah,
we have a very active supporters group in San Antonio, and they are absolutely nuts in a good way. So yeah, actually we're going to have one of them on the pod next week. So we got a lot to cover this week. So let's spend a little bit less time deconstructing and analyzing both of the games as we normally would, and just I guess a little bit more time discussing the overall issues going on with the clubs, play some silly games, and answer some user questions. We have a lot of those this week. So Andy, let's get right into it.
Yeah, we're going to start off with our weekly question. And Kris, I don't know if Mike shared it with you prior, but kind of it's on everyone's. I think the biggest conversation right now is should this be Arsen's last year, or should he sign the contract extension? And I know it's beating a dead horse, but we've never discussed this before, and so I feel like it'd be cool to just have a quick conversation about it. And so the question is, should this be Arsen's last year? And Mike,
not one of our more upbeat questions.
No,
it's
not. No, it's not. But it could be. It could be.
So what's your opinion then?
I'm on the fence. I think what he's done for the club, what he's done for the global footprint that is Arsenal, is massive. I mean, I think I read last year that we are the 5th or 6th most popular sports team in terms of social media. So, in my opinion, that makes us the 5th or 6th most popular sports team in the world. The reason I'm on the fence is I don't want to sound like whatever they call the Arsenal, AKBs or WOBs or whatever the fuck they say, but it kind of highlighted for me today when Ozil came out in the press and suggested that he won't sign a new contract until he knows what Arsene is doing. So my answer is, I think if it's time for a change, obviously. If it isn't with Arsene, then it has to be with Bold and co. Sir Alex Ferguson often changes backroom staff every few years. We need to do that. Our recent run of games suggests that Arsenal players just aren't ready for the matches and they don't show up. So for me, that's solely on our management and coaching. Against Bournemouth, we started the match like we were 9 points ahead of Chelsea, not trailing them. So he finally has a team of talented players, and we finally have a team of depth in positions we've always wanted, but we're stagnant. We're in the same position. So if we're missing passion and for the ability to the boys to get ready for a match, then that's the coaching staff. And so I'm on the fence to say I'd love him to stay if that means we keep Ozil and Sanchez. But I think Danny said on Twitter yesterday, or someone said, are we not doing the exact same as we are with Ozil when we had Denilson? I mean, we're basically in the same position year after year. So my answer is yes, I would love for him to step away and bring in a new manager. But then if that means we lose some of the core players on our team, I don't know how to answer it, Mike. And I know I thought of the question, but I feel like he
stumped himself.
No, I feel like the right answer is we remove a lot of the backroom staff and we bring in some younger, fresher faces, that might be a little bit more animated on the sideline, a little bit more animated in training. And if that means that Arsene stays where he is and keeps his hands-on role with the players, great. But, it's tough to say that we can't keep Ozil and Sanchez if Arsene doesn't stay. It's a tough one. But what I hate is, this question's been debated for years now, and it seems like the general opinion of the masses are those idiots that go on Arsenal fan TV, the same 4 or 5 idiots who just argue with each other, and it's embarrassing.
Well, yeah, that's the fan approach. But Kris, I know you tend to have kind of a glass half full approach, which I admire. What are your thoughts on this question? Much like both of you guys, I'm not really into the whole Wenger in, Wenger out thing. I'm an Arsenal fan, front and centre. That is, I support the club, not the manager. I was around during the latter part of the George Graham era. And indeed the Stuart Houston, Bruce Rioch sort of era, which was tough. I remember the 94-95 season finishing 12th behind the likes of giants like QPR and Spurs and all that lot. So I've been through those tough times. I think I've always maintained you can't keep Arsene Wenger employed just on the strength of what he's done previously, and albeit he has done an incredible amount for not just our football but English football and the club. I think you have to keep him if he is the best man for the job. I personally think he is at the moment. I've seen nothing to suggest he's not. I do think some of our fans have loftier expectations than are realistic at times. And all I've ever said, pretty much all the way through supporting Arsenal, all I've ever wanted us to do is challenge. And we do consistently do that. To what level, that's another debate. But we do challenge. And until the right manager is there, which, by the way, for me, has always been and will always be Carlo Ancelotti, I don't think you need to break something that doesn't need fixing. I'd keep him there as things stand, and particularly when you've got players as big as Mesut saying, "Well, I'll stay if the manager stays." That says a lot to me. Yeah, you don't necessarily want players holding the club hostage. I mean, no player is larger than the club, but you do have to read something into the value that Arsene may bring to the team that may be behind the scenes that we don't see every day when players that influential do say that and tie their fortunes and futures to that. What do you think about Andy's thoughts on the rest of the coaching staff? Because the mentality is an interesting element of it, and one thing that Arsene Wenger is not is Jurgen Klopp. He just personality wise, he isn't. He'll never be, and many people would not want him to be. But are there others that could be tweaked or changed out of the system that might add that element and be able to help the team out that way?
Do you mean other managers or other?
A right-hand person.
My thought is so for me personally, Steve Bold highlights the issue of our club, because how many years have we been so fragile in the back? The same thing this season. We're just seeing stupid goals go in. If he's this defending genius or god, those should be cleared up. But we're seeing him week after week, and it's like, what's he doing? If he's not helping these defenders and putting, I just feel like if Tony Adams was in that seat as our head defensive coach, a lot of these mistakes would not be happening. So that's why I'm kind of thinking maybe we get rid of the Bolds and some of the other assistants and bring in a new wave that's just a fresh idea and a fresh face.
See,
as long as they've never played for Arsenal before, apparently, because that's not allowed, other than Steve Poole.
Well, no,
in a weird way,
true.
I'm kind of torn on this one because I hear that argument a lot, and I totally get where people are coming from. Recently read Ray Parler's book, and he was very upfront and honest, as was Rami Shaban that we had on the podcast a while ago, and he sort of let slip that Pat Rice was very much the man that did all the defensive coaching. And I think after he'd said it, he sort of went, oops, probably shouldn't have said that on a live podcast. And Ray Parler alludes to the fact that Steve Bold was very influential in the defensive coaching in us and just let him get on with it. I think Boldy I think it's good to have old players around, and I would keep Boldy in place, probably as an assistant manager alone. And then if you were going to bring in a defensive coach, I have to be honest, I don't subscribe to the idea of, I love Martin Keown, I love Tony Adams, but I think the game's moved on since they defended, and I don't think coaching the way they defended will work nowadays. I think you have to have a more modern approach. And I would rather see us go out and potentially recruit a defensive coach that has been in the game within the last 4 to 5 years, possibly, who's recently retired, getting in someone like a Lilian Thuram or someone that of that kind of era, who's a little bit more in tune. Eric Abidal's another one, a bit more in tune with the current way of football.
Johan Giroud, I mean,
Sebastian Squillaci,
Yeah.
I would have
all
said
the legends.
I would have said John Terry on my list.
Definitely not after today. But yeah, I'd like to see that. I mean, I think, Guardiola's, I'm not his biggest fan, but I think he's tried to do that a bit with some of the appointments he's brought in, and Klopp seems to sort of do the same with younger coaches. And, it's very difficult because Arsene obviously likes to control pretty much everything at the club. So the other question I would ask you guys really is how much say do you think a coach even gets? Is Arsene just employing people that do a job and then he does it his own way anyway?
Yeah, it's tough to say because if you look at the NFL analogy, I mean, those guys, there's a head coach, and then you've got like a team of 5 or 6 defensive coaches, a team of 5 or 6 offensive coaches, and they essentially do their own thing, and then the team gets all brought back together for the head coach to then say, this is the large picture. So you're right. How much do they get to say to the boys and what kind of influence? But I just think, if we're going down the path of Arsene can attract these big players and they'll stay if he stays, then maybe if we're going to make a change, it's in the back room rather than the big man himself. So, Mike, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, at least I tend to agree with you. At least as a stepping stone to replacement. I mean, if Arsene's going to stay around and coach a team, and he certainly still brings something to the table, you switch the people around him. You see whether that makes a difference or not. If it doesn't, then you really can't conclude that it's anything other than coming from the top. And by it, I'm just talking about the overall mentality, not even so much tactics, but just the mentality that the team, that permeates through the team. And I'll talk about that a little bit because it was very relevant in the Bournemouth and again yesterday in those games. But sometimes people talk about bringing Arsene upstairs as the director of football as a way of keeping him in the club, but I don't get that. Is it just a hedge against losing his connection to the team? Because the things that frustrate people about Arsene the most, how predictable he is, his well-known frugalness in the transfer market. I mean, those things would probably be amplified, not reduced, if he was still kind of dictating our transfer policy or club direction with a new manager in charge. I mean, he's not the type to just kind of accept a figurehead position as a legend of the club. He would be active, he'd be involved, and I'm not sure that accomplishes anything. And so it baffles me when people say, well, time to bring in a new manager, let him go up to the front office, as we call it. Because it just seems like there would be even more problems there. I mean, Fergie left United, and just him sitting in the stands every game was too much pressure for Moyes to handle, much less having to deal with him on a day-to-day basis. So I'm not ready to shout Wenger out from a mountaintop yet, but I mean, it's it is getting frustrating. I count myself in the people that are seeing the same issues, similar issues over and over again. Things change. Players get brought in, players come out, but some of the same issues, mostly when it comes to just the mentality of the team. It's getting harder not to draw a line between those issues and the one thing that is remaining constant at the club.
Yeah.
But I am worried that we'll drop out of the Champions League places. I'm reasonably sure it would happen if we have a transition away from Arsene as the manager, if we lose some of our players who don't want to stick around for a transition. And bigger than that, I'm worried that our current ownership would not push us back into the top four like Liverpool's has done, like Man City's has done, and that we'll just, kind of be stuck in that position for a lot longer than those teams have been.
Yeah, and there's why I'm on the fence, because Mike and Kris, I'm not sure how many of the previous podcasts, but I support 2 Kroenke-owned teams. He doesn't give a shit about either. And so if you do lose Arsene, you're probably losing a very large faction of passion for this club that stays connected with the board. And Kroenke cares about putting people in the seats and making money, and
he won't care. He won't care that we don't have the Champions League money anymore, because he just won't spend Champions League money on players anymore.
Absolutely.
And then we're stuck.
Right.
I wanted to ask you guys actually on that very subject, because obviously I think there's a lot of the British, as you may well be aware, we have this sort of holier than thou presence occasionally, where we like to think that we know everything that there is to know about everything, and the truth is we don't really understand American sports. Some people do, don't get me wrong. We don't either. A lot of people don't. Do you, looking at Stan Kroenke, yes, I get the negatives. I've read enough to know that he's not a particularly straight shooting guy, and as you say, he's more money orientated than anything else. But I've seen a lot of people on social media saying, "Oh, we should get Ali Shrewsbury off him," and I'm thinking that just makes us what we slated Chelsea and Man City for being. Right. And my argument would be, I haven't seen Stan Kroenke refuse to pay big money for a player yet. So sometimes I wonder, and I think, well, what is the big deal? I'm not saying he's a perfect owner, but if he's not refusing to give up money to improve the team, then what's the issue with him?
Yeah,
it's an excellent question.
No, it's a great question, and that's a completely, I think, a longer debate. But for example,
failure to put pressure on the team for succeeding more, but that's not what he's getting. So here, getting slated for.
So not to merge too far away from Arsenal, but here in Colorado, he owns the Denver Nuggets, the Colorado Avalanche. Just recently, the Colorado Avalanche had the head coach Patrick Waugh, which it would basically be like David Seaman coming back to Arsenal and being the manager, or maybe even a Thierry Henry. He was just a massive player, retired for the Avs, has his banner hanging in the stadium, and he was the head coach, and he had a great first season, and then a couple rough patches, and there was never any pressure. And then out of nowhere, last year he quit. And all these people thought, oh, maybe it's because the team is doing so bad he quit. And he came out and said, no, I quit because me and the front office, being the Kroenkes, could not decide on a plan for this team. And he wanted young players, he wanted players that were going to be passionate for the club, and he wanted players that he could build and grow into a Stanley Cup winning team. And essentially he was told by Kroenke, you're going to sign the players I tell you to sign, you're going to sign the players that are cheapest, and we're basically here just to survive and put people in the seats. And so he walked. And that, I think, is my biggest concern, is seeing him do that. He just doesn't care. He cares about the marketing and the social aspect of just putting dollars in the bank. But you're right. On the other side of things, when we signed Xhaka for $35 million, would we have done that 6-7 years ago before he was owner? I'm not sure. So it's a great question, Kris, but that's just kind of what I see from seeing both of his teams. I just don't see him putting the right sort of pressure on the managers to succeed.
People just haven't gotten what they want, which is just a breakthrough and a win and a Premier League title or a deep run in the Champions League. I mean, it's just and the amount of rationale or rational thought about these issues just kind of goes out the window, and it's just whatever's not right that day is the big issue, and it's hard not to get caught up in it. There's a lot not to like about the last 10 years, but there's a tremendous amount to like, that's why every once in a while I like to go to the pub and just get ridiculous with my friends, because that kind of reminds me about what the Gooner fan experience is supposed to be like, win, lose, or draw. That's why I got into this. So, it's a good conversation. We could go on for hours about Wenger, but, we'll see what happens the rest of the year and see whether he resigns. Mm-hmm. I've been saying all along I think he's resigning. For better or for worse, I think it's going to happen.
Yeah.
Can't imagine him walking.
I agree, yeah.
So do you want to get into Bournemouth? Let's stretch back. I know that you've probably done 2 or 3 recaps of this already, Kris, but this is our first podcast since that interesting Tuesday afternoon for us. We saw the game. We know what happened. We gave up 3 goals in a row. First one, complete breakdown on the right side of the defense. The whole quadrant of the field was just completely unmarked. Charlie Daniels, who I'd never heard of before, got the goal. But frankly, he was so wide open that the entire Charlie Daniels band could have ran unmarked into that area and just kind of juggled and passed the ball around for a minute before finally putting it in. Second goal was an iffy penalty. It can be debated. At best, it was a poor call from the ref. At worst, it was just completely unnecessary shove in the back from Xhaka. Completely pathetically taken penalty, only matched by a more pathetic attempt at saving the penalty from Petr Cech. And then finally, the third goal, Ryan Fraser looking more like George Fraser, knocking Bellerin on his ass, and then putting it right into Andy's favorite place, which is between the keeper's legs. So 57 minutes into the game, we're down 3-0. And at that point, my buddy Taylor was next to me and reads from his phone, did some research, and at that point he says, we've never come back from 3 goals to rescue a point in the Premier League. So I'm like, thanks, fucking asshole. But thanks for the positive thing there. So we get a text at that moment from a new listener, Justin. Well, not a new listener, but Justin Pierce from San Francisco at the 67th minute when it's 3-0. He says, guys, did you see a similarity between the Bournemouth and Everton games? Tiredness from fixture congestion, mental fragility under a baying crowd, or both? And it was an interestingly timed tweet because it was right before we started turning the game back in our favor. So we'll cover that in a second. But 70th minute, Giroud flicks it on to Alexis for the headed finish. 75th minute, Giroud flicks it on beautifully to Lucas for a stunning volley. 82nd minute, the red card. Simon Francis with I think a 2-footed scissor that well deserved a red. On Rambo there. Probably got Jace just jumping out of his chair and throwing the television away. And then in the 92nd minute, Olivier Giroud uses his head to tie the game up in dramatic style and uses the remaining 4 minutes of injury time to do a variety of dances in the corner and on the sideline to take the rest of the time. So that's the game in a nutshell, but there's a lot of obvious talking points. Kris, what do you think the pregame talk was about for them to come out that way? I mean, what did Wenger say in the locker room that led to that performance in the first half?
It's really hard to say. I'm kind of in the camp of people that says that maybe it was just one too many games in such a short space of time that caught up a little bit with us. We didn't start well. That's 100% clear. But I think weirdly, like the judgment that people have is often slightly skewed in the fact that if you look at how we started, we didn't actually start that badly. First sort of 10 minutes or so we had a bit of possession and, we were sort of looking dangerous without creating too much. But then obviously we had the utter catastrophe of the 3 goals, or particularly the 2 goals early. And that almost skews how we started because I didn't think we were that bad. But I think we looked like a side that was a bit tired. We looked like a side that had that sort of if we go a goal up, we'll comfortably win. If we don't, we're in trouble here. And we looked a bit leggy. We didn't really play to our strengths either. Once again, we had Giroud up front and we weren't putting the ball into the area where he can profit most from. And decision making was poor all over the pitch. There's so many poor performances. In fairness to Hector Bellerin, he's been brilliant for a long time.
Shocker on Tuesday, though.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, terrible. I thought Ramsey was also at fault for that first goal by not tracking his man. I thought Xhaka was really poor on the night despite his assist. Alexis was sort of flitting in and out, and you always get the work rate, but his end product wasn't brilliant. Mustafi looked like a player, probably touch on Preston later, but again yesterday he looks like a player who's still finding his way back. And I'm in the camp that is a little bit worried about Petr Cech still. So that if you combine all of those things together, and I think afterwards the manager came out and said that I think there was doubts over Koscielny, and who was the other one?
Well, they took him out early, and it appears that he's going to be missing a few weeks from what I've seen, which is extremely worrisome.
Yeah, patched up sign of defence, and it's just a weird one. The fight back really inspired me. I was one of the few, it seems, in the camp that was quite positive about what we showed there. But yeah, the start was poor. Once we went behind, I'd probably go that far.
Yeah. Andy.
Yeah, I know you asked the question, what do you think the pre-game talk was? And my response was, I don't think there was one.
I mean, like some games, did you think that they assume no discussion is necessary, and then they come out and they're like, well, what did you want us to do?
Well, obviously there's a pre-game talk, but Bournemouth is just one of those sides. Eddie Howe is one of those managers that loves to play a team that counterattack like we do, because he is great at doing the same thing. You see a lot of their goals coming off of fast break. That's probably part of the reason that Jack went down there, is because the system that he's set up is very similar to what we do. And for me, it would have been one of those discussions with, same as Everton, this is a banana skin team. We can slip up here, so we got to go out focused. Maybe that was the conversation and the boys were just a little too focused, and that's where shit fell apart. I don't know. But, Everton, Bournemouth, we did the same thing. We just, like Kris said, we started off okay, and then it was just kind of, I think that Xhaka penalty really kind of hit us on the head, because if that doesn't happen, you're 1-0 down and you're thinking, all right, we're not playing terrible. We can get back into this. Now you're in a 2-0 hole. But we saw the same yesterday, right? It's just we start these matches off just so bizarrely, and I don't know that I think it's the run of games, because let's go back to hockey. I mean, these guys sometimes play 5 games in 4 days,
They do?
Well, sometimes.
4 games in 5 days or 5 games in 4 days?
Oh, sorry, 4 games in 6 days. And they're playing back-to-back nights, and, they probably work as hard, if not closest to a football player, with as much as they're skating and running, and so I don't know if that's part of it. I feel like we probably have the right conditioning and medical teams that, carbo load the players after the match, hydrate. So I don't know if it's, but we've got that depth, and we were rotating, and the Koscielny thing is an issue for me, because if he's somewhat hurt going into the match, why are we playing him?
Yeah, I had not heard that there was an awareness of an injury prior to the match. I thought it was something that happened during. But 2 out of the 3 goals that Bournemouth scored could be considered controversial. Obviously, the penalty is always going to be debated. A lot of people feel, myself included, that Fraser fouled Bellerin before coming in and sneaking it between Cech's legs. Do you think that a better refereed game might have turned out differently, or do you not chalk too much up to that controversy?
Controversial or not? Sorry, I'm just jumping. No, controversial or not, the goal still happened, and it didn't appear that we had a game plan or a change in dynamics to the game until it was a little too late. Kris, what do you think?
I think you're right. I do subscribe to the idea that if the Xhaka one is a penalty, and for me it is, then the Ryan Fraser one, you should be giving the 2 as the same. I don't think it was a difficult decision to make personally. I thought it was a fairly clear-cut shove. You could see it from every angle on the TV, and I don't think you'd see anything different on the pitch. So, yes, I suppose
that is a good point. The 2 players coming together shoulder to shoulder. they're very similar, and they were called in the complete opposite manner.
Yeah, and Xhaka was so naive to do that, and it's a clear raising of the arm, and it's the sort of thing that he did do at Gladbach. He's known for being a physical, intimidating player, and you can get away with it in Germany a little bit because it's a bit more of a, and not so much more of a physical league, but the referees tend to let a lot more go. And it was just such a silly decision. And yeah, I mean, I thought overall the referee was all right. I must admit, even when we do the ABW radio shows, I tend not to be one of those that will blame a decision on the referee. Yes, you can have a bad penalty call and you can be angry about that, but ultimately there's 90 minutes in which to put that right.
Yeah.
And, we didn't concede 3 goals because of a referee. We conceded 3 goals because we were defending appallingly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And we didn't lose to Man City because of the referee. We lost because we lost because we weren't the better team on the day, or the better prepared team on the day. And it's just, I subscribe to that same school. It drives me crazy. I get upset with refereeing decisions as they're happening, but it drives me crazy when 24 hours after a game, I see, these long, drawn out analyses based on opinion, but purported to be based on facts of how refereeing decisions have cost us more than everybody else. It's just it's kind of it's a lame excuse, to use a very specific term. But I thought that the way that they played on Tuesday, meaning they played 2 different games, one in the first 70 minutes, the other in the last 20 minutes, kind of throws some water on the concern about them being fatigued from so many games, because you would. And I know the gameplay dictated this, but you would expect them not to get stronger at the end of the game if they were that tired. And most of the players that contributed the most towards that comeback had been in the game from the beginning. Maybe 1 or 2 had been brought on, but I mean, to me, it's far from the first time you've seen the team just kind of wake up from this slumber that they're in after scoring the first goal. When it kind of like, oh wait, we can actually maybe come back. There's a little bit of time left, but it doesn't happen after their first goal, Bournemouth. It doesn't happen after their second goal. It happens after we finally punch one back. We saw in the last 20, 30 minutes of the game what this team is capable of doing when they have their tails up. And this is even before, we were 11 on 10 with the red card. So, I mean, if we couldn't pull that run of play when we wanted to, and we're just not good enough, and we weren't capable of playing like we did in the last 20 minutes, that would be one thing. Because, you kind of know what we are and you know what to expect, and going down 2-0, you're not going to come back and win, much less 3-0. But, we've scored goals in bunches. They always tend to be irresistible once the engine gets going. And I mean, they were unstoppable for the last 20, 25 minutes of this game. So why can't it get started when we're level? Why can't it get started in the first half rather than waiting until we're down a goal or 2? And that's what drives me crazy. I mean, you don't see teams like Madrid and Barca and Bayern, Dortmund. I mean, these teams sometimes come out of the gates, not always, but sometimes come out of the gates just absolutely irresistible, and it doesn't take an emergency to get them to kick in. I mean, am I the only person that notices that? It's almost when the first good thing happens, then the team's belief kicks in, and they start playing a completely different level of football.
Yeah, we've started so many matches this season with that high press, closing down, and it seems like over the Christmas break we kind of punched the brakes there a little bit because of maybe the fixture congestion and the fear that we will tired the players out. But you're right. You can't say that they're fatigued when they're in the last 25 minutes going balls to the wall and bringing these games back. So
and dancing and all that stuff.
I think that's bullshit. The whole
I know.
But at the end of the day, we're the Arsenal, and when we go and play teams like Everton, Bournemouth, Preston, we should be walking out on that pitch, and there should be just a sense of fear from those players based on our name and then the way we play. And, Pep does it all the time where we keep possession of the game, we hold the possession, we dominate what's happening. We didn't do that in these other games. And we need to go back to that tiki-taka, the way we've always played. We haven't seen that recently. That's, I think, how we dominate these matches. Because we're going to score goals. We have the offensive power to do that. And no matter who we have on the team, we know that they can play in those positions, and we know that they can put the ball in the back of the net. We just need to do a better job of dominating the entire match. And I feel like in the couple losses we've had, we haven't done that. And that's the frustrating thing about how the team is playing right now.
Yeah, it's almost like it's like a rope-a-dope thing where we have to get punched a couple times before we finally wake up and start fighting back. And Kris, I mean, is that, first of all, do you agree with that with that concern? And if so, does that issue come down to the mentality of the players on our field not being strong enough? I mean, Alexis excluded from that, or is it come down to the mentality set in by the manager?
I don't think it's all, I'm, again, without sort of wishing to be sort of pro Arsene Wenger in this argument, I do think the players have got a lot of responsibility. We talked about, obviously previously, about what was said to them before the game. Arsene is always famously quite, it's quite evident from past players that the players are given an instruction of what to do, and then they're expected to go out and carry out those instructions rather than a rousing pre-match team talk. And I think if you look at, for example, how poor, I don't want to make this about other teams, but how poor Manchester City were at Liverpool. Okay, they weren't 3-0 down, fine, they lost 1-0, but they did next to nothing to get back into that game, and yet nothing is really reported about how terrible they were. Well, because it's Arsenal, they're falling to bits, their title challenge is crumbling, because it's so fresh in everyone's mind that we do it so often. I do just think that some of our players, they just... It's so true, but
it is. That's why it made me laugh.
It's painful to admit, but it is true. I don't know. I just think some of our players. I don't think it's a lack of winning mentality. They all want to win. I just don't know what it's almost like we freeze. It is almost like we lose a couple of goals and then we just sort of freeze, and then all of a sudden it was a shot to nothing at 3-0. It was a Hail Mary, and credit where credit's due. We got something out of that game, because the last time I remember us coming back from a sizable deficit in that kind of game was Bolton away, and I think that's got to be, well, it was the cranberry and blue hooped kit, so that was a number of years ago.
Yeah, I mean, we're definitely experiencing giving up for coming from 4 goals ahead to drop points, but not from 3 goals behind to gain them. So that was the first time. The last 20 minutes was phenomenal. It's what you want to see. I'd love it for the first 20 minutes and then kind of waste the rest of the game out. But even the bartender at the bar that I won't call it a pub, it's more of a restaurant, but that we watched the game at on Tuesday, who I don't think has ever seen a soccer ball before in her life. Was completely into that game because she knew that our team was just getting trashed, and then all of a sudden just came back quickly. So it was exciting. Really quick, Giroud, much ado about nothing or worth the debate? I saw a tweet that just made me laugh, and it was a trolling tweet from a Manchester United fan trolling Giroud for dancing, but I retweeted it. It just made me giggle because it's this guy just popping and locking and breakdancing for like 5 minutes in a parking garage, and I forget it was something like Harry Kane scores a goal, grabs the ball, goes to the center circle. Rashford scores, grabs the ball, goes to the center circle. Giroud grabs the ball, and then the video comes on. It's just, I think it's a hilarious debate, and I don't think that it impacted the game at all, and I know that you don't, Andy.
No, I think anyone suggests that celebration is the reason why we didn't win 4-3. We lost the game, or we lost the momentum, or we tied the game because of our first 60 minutes when the team failed to show up. It wasn't because Giroud did a little bit of a celebration. I mean, yeah, would I have loved to have seen him grab the ball and run it back? Absolutely, but who gets possession?
And Wenger said as much as well. But I mean,
who gets possession off of a kickoff? Bournemouth. They could have held the ball for another minute. Like, who's to say that we could have run down? Like, just anyone who says that he's the reason we didn't win is bullshit. He's the reason we tied the game. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah, two beautiful flick-ons and a finish.
Yeah.
I was shocked when I saw him getting that much. And I understand why, but I heard something like, "Oh, did you see his celebration?" And what people are saying about it, and I just assumed that it was, a funny celebration because we're jumping around at the bar. I didn't even see it live. I didn't realize he was catching a lot of shit over it, which just to me, I mean, we're talking about 15 seconds.
Mm-hmm. It's an emotional game as well, isn't it? People forget that. Like you in that split second, you cannot tell me that any Arsenal fan anywhere in the world, at the minute that ball hit the net for 3-3, you cannot tell me that any Arsenal fan sat there and went, splendid, right, let's go and get a fourth immediately back. No, everyone was losing their shit, even if it was for 15 seconds. And like you say, Bournemouth had the kick-off. They could have gone backwards or sideways, and they actually had a chance straight from the kick-off, and they could have gone 4-3.
Yeah.
How would people have reacted if we'd have got the ball? Do you remember Oxlade-Chamberlain against Monaco 2 years ago?
Yeah.
Raced to the centre circle, put the ball down, and we conceded almost straight away. Well, sometimes you actually have to just take a second and go, right, we're back in the game. There was enough time potentially to create another couple of chances, but you still have to win the ball back in order to do that. So it's just a classic, and it's one of the few things that I hate about being an Arsenal fan. There are a lot of our fans that are not happy unless they're whinging about something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're not happy unless they're not happy.
Exactly.
Yeah. So my second favorite goal celebration of all time, the first one, which will never be defeated, belongs to Jason Punchin. You referred to losing your shit. He scored a goal the game following where he had a little incident at Southampton, and I think wiped his ass on the corner flag in tribute.
That is awesome.
So both Punchin and
seen...
Giroud both celebrated their most famous moment in a goal celebration.
Have you ever seen the celebration by an ex-Newcastle player, Georgian, to Murray Ketspire? You ever seen that one?
No, I can't say that I have.
I would urge you to look it up. He scores at St James's Park. It's in the Alan Shearer era. He's a big, bold fella, so he's not difficult to spot. He scores and he races to the crowd. He takes his shirt off. And just kicks the living crap out of the advertising hoardings before trying to enter the crowd and then being told, no, we need to kick off. So at which point he tries to find his shirt that he's discarded somewhere behind him and then tries to go again. But he just goes absolutely mental. It's well worth a look.
I love it. I can't wait to see it. So, yeah, Bellerin. I am in love with Hector Bellerin. I'm so happy we re-signed him. He is everything that this club needs to be identifying with moving forward. A guy that wants to be here, a guy that's young, hungry. But boy, did he suck in this game. 5.5 Opta rating. I've taken to copying Danny and looking at who scored. It's an amazing website. 5.5 Opta rating. 0 tackles in the game. Dispossessed twice. Which probably shouldn't be happening that much to a right back. Even Ox had 2 tackles, and he was only in the game for about 15 minutes. But, I'm willing to give him a pass, A, because we got away with it with a point, and B, because I'm in love with him, and I don't want his confidence to be hurt by the dagger of my criticism. So don't let that get back to him, please. Oh, injuries. We have a lot of them.
Surprise, surprise.
Yeah. Theo, Lucas, Koscielny. Well, did Lucas? Lucas got in yesterday, so he's not. He got in the game yesterday, right? Yeah, he started the game yesterday. Koscielny, Coquelin, Gibbs, Debussy, Mertesacker, Santi. I mean, what are Shad, Forsyth, and Colin Lewin doing?
Nothing.
I mean, in the U.S., we have a malpractice crisis where people sue left and right for like physicians like pulling your nail or doing a small thing wrong. But I mean, this is where I would be suing. I mean, what is wrong with these people? We have so many soft tissue injuries, as Dom loves to say. These guys need to be making our players' tissues harder, not softer. Personally, I have very few problems making tissues harder. But
I thought Gary Lewin was supposed to be coming back.
I don't know which Lewin it is. Colin, Gary.
Colin's employed now. Gary is the guy who's supposed to be coming back from England.
Yeah.
I don't remember back in the 90s, early 2000s when Gary was our head physio that we had this many injuries.
Yeah, I mean, I just remember. I don't know what it is. I don't know, and I don't
honestly,
want to get into a debate about it. Is it training? Is it?
I think it is training, and I think a lot of it is we're way too pristine nowadays, from the youth level to the adult level, with these pitches that they're training on. I mean, they're usually immaculate, and it's like training on those and then having all of the perfect equipment. I feel like nowadays it's a little bit too much, and I want to see our players playing on training pitches that have divots taken out of them, because I think Klopp said it about Sturridge. There's a difference between being hurt and being injured or something like that, and it's like mentally, are we setting? Let's be honest. Football players are a bunch of whiny bitches nowadays. I mean, the amount they roll around, the amount that they get injured and hurt, it's all bullshit. Sorry to keep going back to hockey, but those dudes take a puck in the face.
Go do a hockey podcast.
No, but they get a puck in the face. They go get 9 stitches in a 5-minute break, and they come back out and they finish the game. You'd never see that in football. You wouldn't. So part of my theory is we have 2 pristine conditions, and they're practicing on those, and we need to get them on shittier pitches. That's what I think.
It's interesting.
It's just my thought.
Is it just your thought?
Read my thesis paper on it.
Excellent. And your other podcast. So yeah, of course, with these injuries, just as Xhaka is starting to settle into the Santi role pretty much full time now, he's got to switch back over and become probably the more defensive minded of the center midfielders. But I'm interested, and so far I think reasonably good after yesterday to see him and Rambo get a run together. But I mean, that pair concerns me against certain offenses like we'll be facing in a couple weeks against Chelsea. But
now, here's a question to that, Mike. Does that pair concern you, or does Ramsey concern you? And Kris, I'd love to hear your opinion on Ramsey right now, based off what we've seen this season and yesterday.
And he's got a relationship that depends on this answer.
No, Jason, we have different views on things. This is probably one of them. I'm not one of these fans that dislikes our own players, nor am I a fan who wants players to be injured or sold. And there are people out there like that, sadly.
They're not really fans at that point, I don't think.
No, I agree. I think that sometimes you can have a player that is, undeniably gifted, but just doesn't potentially suit the employers he's at. I mean, you can do it in a job. You can be qualified all the way to the hilt, and you can just not fit into the office you get the job at. A variety of things can affect you. And for me, with Aaron Ramsey, I just feel like he had that amazing season, and it was amazing. We got all those goals, his assists, and he was playing in an Ozil system, and it seemed to suit him. And I think as long as Mesut's at the club, he isn't going to play further forward. He's not a number 10, as Jace will tell you. He plays almost wide of the 3, opposite side to Bale for Wales. But it's almost a free role. And I think at Wales, he has that free role. At Arsenal, he doesn't. And he has other players of, no disrespect to Wales, but higher level players where it's not all about just, being gritty in a team ethic. It's about superstar players playing alongside him. And I don't personally trust Aaron Ramsey centrally. Mm-hmm. I do think he gives the ball up too often. I said this about Lucas Perez Gabriel yesterday on our show. He also strikes me as a player that doesn't seem to learn from previous mistakes, whether it's the back heels, the pirouettes, the Hollywood balls. And I do think he's an incredibly gifted player, but I'm just not sure that Arsenal's going to ever be the right fit. And then I get people telling me that he'll walk into PSG side and Bayern Munich side. It's not happening. It's not. And I look at some of the players we've missed out on. I think, imagine putting Arturo Vidal in that midfield now, or Marco Verratti.
I was about to just say. Well, I was just going to say Verratti is the name that comes to my mind, because there are a number of players, as Kris just said, who we didn't sign because of the growth expected from Ramsey. And I agree with you. I don't think we're going to see the capability of Ramsey. I think going on social media and all these people slagging him off is just outrageous. But we have held back from buying some players that could have potentially turned this team around because we've held out. I think enough's enough. I think we're not seeing the Ramsey. We're falling victim to it a little bit with the Ox right now because he is still so young. Are we not signing the depth in the wing position because we're thinking, because Arsene thinks, hey, the Ox is going to come through. So yeah, that's another debate you could go on for hours about players we didn't sign because we thought, hey, this person's going to come through. And I feel like, if you put Ramsey on a completely different side, maybe not of our caliber, he'll probably absolutely dominate because
Cardiff.
Or a different system. That's the other thing. Either in a
Yeah.
different, in a three at the back or a 5-man midfield. I think he flourishes. If you put an out and out holding midfielder like a Coquelin at the base of the midfield, and then you play two, Ramsey and another. So Ramsey and Xhaka almost in front of that. So you basically say to Ramsey, look, if you lose the ball, it doesn't matter because Coquelin's behind you. The trouble I have is that when he loses the ball right now, he's only got Xhaka next to him, and Xhaka can't do the job for everyone. So maybe a different system would suit him. And I really genuinely, I hope I'm talking out my arse. I hope I'm completely wrong, and I hope he scores 10 goals this season, gets another 20 assists, and stays fit, because that's another issue with Aaron. He hasn't found consistency, and when he's constantly getting these injuries, when's he going to find consistency?
Yeah, well, he's probably about to get a pretty decent run of games in the same role, rather than being switched around from winger to central, and with the injuries we've had, we're kind of on a high wire without a net right now with the two of them there until Aneni gets back and until Coquelin's feeling better. But this is his opportunity, because I think he should have some consistency to at least approach the games knowing exactly what his role is going to be. So hopefully a month from now we'll be singing his praises rather than continuing to have this conversation that seems to be having. And the last thing that just absolutely drove me crazy about the Bournemouth game is Arsene's comments after the game. And I'll tell you, less about what's on the field and more about what's off the field is what's starting to turn me a little bit on and give me pause about him, because there seems to be no accountability, no recognition of the mentality and the weaknesses that they had. Now, I don't have his direct quotes, but I do recall they were fairly leaning on the fatigue and the 3 games in 2 days and the refereeing, and when he does that, I lose a little bit of admiration, because he really needs to come out and say we didn't play well enough, and not start whinging about these other issues, as far as I'm concerned. So do you support what he had to say, Kris, or does that give you any pause, or is that his role to deflect from the team and focus on other issues?
Yeah, I think it's a fine line, because we as Arsenal fans, we've all jumped on our high horse about Mourinho, for example, throwing his players under the bus and saying, "Oh, that's ridiculous. How on earth can he say that about Luke Shaw being fat or Fellaini being not up to it and all this?" So it's a very fine line. And the thing is with Arsene Wenger as well is obviously his management style. He's never been a teacup thrower. He's never been a rant and raver. He's always been I've signed you, I believe in you. To then suddenly start coming out the press and going, "Well, I don't think this was right. Don't think that was right." In effect, kind of goes against his principles. I don't think it would kill for him to sort of say, as a team, we weren't at it tonight, rather than fingering individuals. That's a horrible term.
Oh, no. We don't support fingering anybody on the show.
No.
I don't even mean in the Arsene context to call out players. It wouldn't have done anybody any good for him to say Bellerin was poor today. That's not what I'm suggesting. But less focus on excuses and more focus on the team itself, rather than all these external factors that caused the team to play poorly. I think, that's what I'd like to start hearing. Yeah,
that's fair, definitely.
So, then that puts a bow on Tuesday. FA Cup yesterday. You got some thoughts, Andy, on this game yesterday? There was a lot of similarities in a sense.
Yeah, I think my first thought was it's boring seeing us start the same the same match every way of just, God damn it. It's boring seeing us start the same way every match. It's Preston. I expected, I was thinking to myself as the game kicked off, I said, all right, by 15 minutes in, we should be 1 or 2-0 up. And God, we looked awful. And it wasn't just like 1 or 2 players looking awful. Xhaka, Mustafi, Ox, Ramsey. We just looked terrible. Like everyone again looked flat, and it looked like we just weren't ready to play in a match.
Yeah, and I looked at that lineup and said, we've rotated, we've rested a lot of our top guys, but that front four. Lucas and Ox putting in crosses for Giroud, and Iwobi getting to play kind of where he seems to like playing in the number 10 role. I'm like, we have to jump on this team early. We have the firepower to do it, but it just seems like those guys didn't get a sniff of the ball in the first 10 or 15 minutes. We were defending and playing passively, and the this goes back to what I was saying before. There just doesn't seem to be a spark for the team to control matters out of their own resolve. There's always this waiting for something to happen, either going down a goal or a refereeing decision or a penalty or a red card, before they start putting their best out on the field. And the perfect example of this yesterday, I hate to say it, but is our boy Chambo. Just shockingly bad in the first half, in my opinion. He either was dispossessed or just dribbled into a cul-de-sac where two Preston players were more than happy to take the ball off of him at least 6 times in the first hour of the game. I mean, he was just not mentally there yesterday, and I don't know why.
No, absolutely. First, everyone knows we love the Ox, but yesterday he was woeful, and this is the type of he goes from playing an absolute worldie against West Ham to this, and you're like thinking, okay, for you to get a run of games in this first team, you need to be going out and just absolutely destroying Preston. But the same thing with Iwobi. It's just like, how many times did he get the ball, run forward, stop, and then 2 Preston players are on him and he didn't know what to do? I mean, we just looked terrible. Kris, what do you think?
Yeah, we're not Arsene Wenger. We're not afraid to slate individual players where it's warranted.
No, great. Well, I have a small confession actually with this game. I missed the first 25 minutes, I guess, ish, which is probably a blessing in disguise. I have to say, I have been back and watched them since, but I was viewing some property with my partner at the time, so it was lucky that I kind of skipped the first. I had the game on the radio and was listening in as we walked around, but it sounded a lot to me like we weren't at it. I don't think you can blame too many of the changes. Ainsley Maitland-Niles, had a bit of a torrid time first half. Chamberlain, as you say, went missing.
What are we supposed to say? Conservative?
Oh, conservative, yes, indeed. He had a tough day. Oxlade-Chamberlain, as you say, was missing in action completely. Again, I thought, again, don't want to pick on him, but I thought Ramsey was poor. I thought Xhaka was poor again. Too many performances were not good. Gabriel was abysmal. I mean, again, I don't like slating players, but for me,
the Gabriel Mustafi partnership needs to last as little time as possible. Rob Holding, time.
Yeah, I agree. For me, Gabriel, I said it on our radio show last night. He exhibits the sort of the idea, the Stepanov's theory, as I like to call it, in that you look at him and you go, he's not an Arsenal player. Why is he in this team? He just, the passing is limited. The ability to read the game is poor. His movement, he's got the turning circle of the Titanic. I just, and I want it to work, but I think he suits Spanish football, and I can see why we bought him, because at Villarreal, in that sort of passing defensive style with everything's in front of him, I imagine his stats will look fantastic. But in the hurly-burly of a cup-type Preston, when you've got teams kicking you all over the place and running at you, he got taken apart. So I was very glad we came through to tie the end, because from what I saw, have since watched back in that first half, it was horrific, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Gabriel's our long-term answer at backup right back, actually. I mean, what he displayed at right back, he looked better than he did at center back, and there's certainly less damage that you can do if you have a poor game on the right side than in the center, I suppose. But I like him. I don't like looking at him necessarily, but he's no Giroud when it comes to facially. But the which is something I look for in every player, of course.
One of my biggest concerns in this match was.
Thank you for pulling me out of that.
You're welcome, Mike. One of my biggest concerns in this match was why it took us so long to bring on substitutions, because. Again, because we weren't changing the match. It's not like we were growing into it. We were consistently shambolic, right? And what a time for Ramsey to score, because right on the stroke of the second half starting, absolutely amazing time to score, because you're Preston on such a high and we knocked him back down. But we still had that 30-minute run where we just weren't great. And one of the shining lights, I think, out of yesterday's performance outside of the win was Welbeck coming on. But why did we wait until the 83rd minute or so to bring him on? I would have rather we given him – it's that same theory we talked about a couple of weeks ago. When you bring a player on so late, they're so desperate to do something, they overexert themselves, and they push themselves a little bit harder. I would rather we brought him on for 15 – 20 minutes earlier, and Arsene could have said to him, hey, give yourself 5 to 7 minutes to warm up and then pursue this game like you've got a fire at your ass, and why don't we make those changes? I don't understand why we're not substituting earlier in the game.
Yeah, I mean, things were going so well, so why change anything? But, I mean, 83rd minute and then the other two in the 91st minute of the game. Kris, explain to us why he waits that long.
I wish Kris. I wish I could.
Come on, Mr. Insider. Let's get the answer to that question finally.
It's a really hard one, isn't it? Because I suppose, you get two types of managers. You get those that leave it, to half time and go, right, we'd make massive changes. Obviously managers change things in the first half before. And again, it's a delicate balance because you don't want to completely kill a player, to use an Arsene Wenger term. Yeah. And confidence is a big thing for players. I don't know. I'm kind of with you guys in that I would quite like to. I'd quite like to see the substitutions made a bit earlier at times, not all in one go, but I think sometimes even on the hour. I mean, like managing Sunday League level that I do, I tend to sort of look at things. If we're down at half time, I usually give it 10-15 into the second half, and if nothing's changed, then we change it. But it's very difficult. I think Arsene Wenger has just got his way. He sticks by it, and sometimes it works. And that's the one thing you would say. Sometimes he does deviate from it slightly, and it works even better. But I think he would also have looked at that game as well yesterday in particular and thought, well, look, Preston are a Championship side. Their legs are going to go quicker than ours because you think that we have better facilities and potentially fitter players or more athletic players. I think he backed what we had on the pitch to be good enough to go and win the game, and as it turned out, it was. There would also be a worry about Welbeck, of course. Do you give him too long? Even though he was the obvious replacement, he's just come back off of all this time. If you put him out there for half an hour and his hamstring goes pop after 10 minutes, then all the fans are at it again. So maybe there was that in his mind. But yeah, it's a weird thing with us, but I don't think it's ever going to change, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Certainly doesn't seem like it. They keep getting later and later, as opposed to earlier and earlier. So
I do want to make two comments about Welbeck. The fact that in the minimal time he had on the pitch, he had made the keeper make a very decent save. So it's great to see we have another striker coming back in or a left wing player that we can rely on to create. And honestly, I really hope he stays fixed. He's such a dangerous player. But also, I'm so impressed with Lucas. The last couple matches he's played in, he's looked tremendous. And what do you guys think about him? Because I feel like he should be in our starting 11 without question, just based off of recent performance.
Kris?
Ooh, I'm going to throw a spanner in the works here. Yes, but again, our fan base are very sort of divisive on this one because we have a tendency as Arsenal fans to either massively slate a player for no apparent reason or big up a player like the second coming of Jesus. And my worry with Lucas is that there's a reason he hasn't played many games until recently. His tracking back, I think, is clearly one of them. The manager likes players who put in a shift, and I think he's at Arsenal. It's a big trust thing. I'm not convinced he's got the trust of Lucas to play 90 minutes, which is why he's been a sub so often. His numbers don't lie, and again, I hope he continues to develop like this. The only thing I would say is if you look at the opposition he's done it against, those numbers are slightly skewed. In that.
Nottingham Forest.
Forest, Bournemouth, Preston. I'm not having a go at the guy. I'm delighted. I hope he goes on to scores 20 a season and is at well beater. I just think there's a bit of Jose Reyes there, and I think we're going to have to be patient with him. And for every good game he has, he might have a couple that are not so good, and we have to just be patient. His goal in midweek was superb. Technically, he's there. Technically, he clearly is a very good player, but he's Spanish. He's brought up in a country where technical football is taught at a high level. So that side of things, he's fine. And the goal was the composure in the last minute to do that. Fantastic. I'm just not sold on the idea, like a lot of Arsenal fans, that he should be starting every game.
Well, and I won't say that I'm in the hailing him like Jesus camp, but what we do say a lot with players is we want them to make a difference when they come on, and I feel like he's justifying a starting position by taking what is given to him. So he's given these opportunities and he's taken advantage. I mean, 11 goals in his last 10 matches, or contributed to 11 goals in the last 10. We're not seeing the Ox do that. Iwobi's kind of peaks and valleys, right, up and down. So if Lucas is going to, regardless of who's in front of him opposition-wise, if he's going to take the advantage that's given to him and say, hey, I'm going to help contribute, then for me, he's got to start over the Ox. And if Iwobi, I thought, was dire yesterday, if he's going to start over Iwobi, fine. And like you said, we got to give him time, and we've got to kind of hope.
We have the luxury to be able to kind of switch these guys in and out at
we
times.
do, but if he's contributing, then I feel like he's got to play,
And he's not afraid to put a cross in for Giroud. So as long as Giroud is reclaiming his spot up top again, at least for now.
And Kris, I can't say you think he doesn't track back. What was the goal? I think it was the City match, wasn't it? Where he tracked back, put a foot in, and then that created the counter.
That's my issue, to be honest. That's my issue, because he did it, and he did it brilliantly. And then you watch him against other teams, and you go, because was it Gabriel that chewed him out recently for not doing it? So I think that's the frustration. When you see a player can do it, and then they don't. Mm-hmm. You look at someone like Mesut Ozil, who, bless him, he's never really ever going to track back.
No,
it's not his game, No. But when you actually see somebody do it, and then the next time they don't do it, I think, and again, that's the trust thing with Arsene Wenger. I think he wants to know players do it every time. And I know what some people listening to this will be screaming at their generic fruit-based device and saying, well, that's stolen off of a BBC show, by the way. I can't take credit for that. But they're going to be saying, well, what about Iwobi? He does the same thing. Well, there's a difference with Iwobi. He is a number 10. Yeah. He's been played out of position. He's come through the ranks at Arsenal as a wide forward, but he is a Mesut Ozil number 10 player. He's not used to tracking back from a wide position, so he's still learning. Lucas Perez is a striker by trade. That's what he was at Deportivo, and we're converting him to be a wide forward. And if you're going to do that, you have to learn to track back. And he's not a young lad. Iwobi, you sort of go, okay, well, still learning the game.
Yeah, he's a project.
Yeah. Exactly. Lucas is 28, 29? If you're not going to work hard now, then when are you going to be able to learn that skill?
Yeah. But if he's 28, 29 in the same breath, should we not just leave him as a striker? I mean, is it worth trying to convert him?
No, I'm 100% with you.
Yeah.
It's one of my... Do you know what? That's the biggest bugbear I have, is that so many of our fans and people on social media in the summer were going off on one every single day. I know that's hard to believe, our fans going off on one. But, day in, day out, we need a striker. We need a centre forward. Why aren't we buying a 9? So we go and get one, albeit, let's be honest, a second level one for what we were aiming at.
Yep.
We get one, and we play him wide. And yet everybody's delighted with this. And I'm like, well, we've bought a striker. Everyone craved a striker, and now you're all happy that we're playing him wide. It seems strange to me in that surely he's an ideal person to rotate with Alexis Sanchez when Alexis is up front if you want to give him a rest. Surely,
absolutely.
I'd rather us gone out and actually bought a designated wide forward if indeed we needed one. I know Fivey from the podcast has said the same. Dom said the same about a Marco Reus, a Julian Draxler type of player, which I don't think we would get anyway. But I'd rather we go out and buy an actual player for the position rather than constantly trying to put square pegs in round holes and reinvent players. However good they're doing at the role, his best form, which is what made us sign him from Deportivo, was his goal scoring in his last season when he played as a striker. And now we're trying to convert him back again. Yeah. Seems a bit of an odd one to me.
It does.
That's what Arsene loves to do. So we'll see how that works out. End of the day, we win. We progress. It wasn't easy, but onto a deep run in the cup. Hopefully, I love those deep runs into cups. Certainly better outcome than a replay on January 17th that we don't need. Liverpool will be doing, a couple other Premier League teams will be playing an extra game. Fourth round draw takes place tomorrow, Monday at 7:10 in the UK, which is anywhere from 11 to 2:10, depending on where you live in the States, unless you're in Maui, and it's 8:10 a.m. But Arsenal is ball number 20 for the, and that is just hugely significant for no good reason. Who's picking the balls tomorrow? We're trying to do a genitalia-free podcast here, but since we can't do that, who's picking the balls tomorrow? Do you know? Any clue?
I've got no idea, to be honest. I don't know who's...
Michael
sure
Owen and Martin Keown.
Who?
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm fully expecting a nice home tie against Accrington, Stanley, Argyle, and Hove Albion Wednesday, which is my favorite lower division team. There's actually going to be somewhere around 20 lower division clubs out of the 32 that are still in there. So always interesting to see those matchups tomorrow. But we're moving on, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, let's move on to user questions.
User questions. I don't even call them listener questions anymore because people don't so much listen to our podcast as much as they use it.
They do. They use and abuse it. All we are to them, Mike, is just 2 pieces of hunky man meat.
2 rather large pieces of hunky man meat. All right, so we actually got a bunch of questions this week. Everyone was excited about Kris coming on the show. So we'll start off with our good friend Dougie Cazorla. That's not his actual name, but Doug from Syracuse has a bunch of questions. I think you might even refer to it as a raft of questions. I know he listens to every podcast with the word Arsenal, Gooner, or Hipster in the name. So I know he was excited about Kris coming on. He asks, if you could have one player at Arsenal, Kris, from Ligue 1, not named Fekir or Lacazette, who would it be?
Yeah, that's the clever part, because he obviously knows of me and who I love, because they are the 2 I love. The obvious one outside of those 2 is a lad at Monaco called Kylian Mbappé Lotin, who some people will be familiar with, other people will not have a clue even how to say it, let alone him playing. But he is the young lad who's being dubbed the new Thierry Henry, so no pressure. But he's I'd liken, rather than Thierry Henry, who obviously we signed, who he was at a decent level at Juventus. Lotin is more of your Nicolas Anelka type. Mm-hmm. He's been at Monaco his whole career. He's only 18 years of age. He's a good size. He's nearly 6 foot, I think, if not 6 foot. Athletic, powerful, can play either the wide midfield positions. He's got a bit of arrogance, a bit of swagger about him. And I have a horrible feeling he's going to end up at Man City. The only thing that makes me think maybe he won't is because they've got Jesus playing for them, whatever his name is, Gabriel Jesus, the striker.
They actually have 2 Jesuses on their team now.
They do, don't they? Yeah,
they're cornering the market on Jesus.
They are. But yeah, he's a player I absolutely love, and I think he's within the next, I would say, 2 seasons max, maybe sooner. He will be a player that people will go, wow, this kid is fantastic, and I hope he ends up at Arsenal.
Does he have the chance to kind of end up like? I mean, I remember hearing about Eden Hazard at Lille years and years before not years and years, maybe 2 to 3 years before he was ultimately sold to Chelsea, and we were linked with him, and then all of a sudden he just became what everyone thought he would be, and that in doing so became too difficult of a transfer for us to participate in. So is that the danger with a guy like this?
It's one of those that you need to get him now, because if you don't, his price tag's only going to go up. And Monaco, obviously, recent seasons have got a good record of selling players, quite a high value. The one good thing about Monaco is that they've got a lot of players that are going to go for a lot of money in the summer. Bernardo Silva. Bernardo Silva is one that leaps to mind that will be sold. Crikey, I've gone blank. There's a few at Monaco now that will move on. Lotin is another one. Bakayoko, the midfielder, is another one. Thomas Lemar is another one. So they have got players that will probably be interesting other clubs. Fabinho is the great white hope as well, which I think Man United is sniffing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I think if you're going to get Lotin, you have to get him now, because his price tag is going to go through the roof. I'll give you 2 others, just full hipster ones, players that maybe people might not be aware of. you might know that Nice are top of Ligue 1 at the moment.
Amazing.
The unheralded Nice.
Balotelli.
Two players, not Balotelli. There's two players who play for Nice who've got big careers ahead of them. One is Vincent Cosiello, who's a diminutive kind of Santi-sized central midfielder. He needs to fill out a bit, but he's only 21. He will be a very, very big player. Probably going to end up in Italy, sadly, but he's one. And they've also got a centre-back who's only 17 called Malang Sarr. Who's built like a brick shithouse, as we'd say in the UK. He is basically Kurt Zuma, but younger, quicker, and he's a unit.
Better.
He's hopefully. They think very, very highly of him, and at 17, somebody's going to take a punt at some point, and he's got all the physical attributes to be an amazing defender. Reads the game really well. So there's two sort of full left field pools for you.
That was total hipster action.
Now, Kris, would you take that center back knowing that we have Callum Chambers and Rob Holding kind of in that mold and grow fashion? Because I would. I'd say, let's get as many as we can. The best one that comes through, the other ones we sell. But would you take the punt right now knowing that we have those two coming through our ranks?
Yes, I would, because Koscielny's 30.
Mm-hmm.
Mustafi long term is probably going to be the guy who takes over there. Obviously, Matt Saka will stick around for another year as experience, but he's not going to go on forever. I've already said before, I don't think Gabriel is good enough. Callum Chambers has been brilliant at Middlesbrough, but I wonder if that's because he's at the level of club that maybe he needs to be at, i.e. less pressure.
Right. Yep.
And then as you say, then you've got Rob Holding. If you look at how many clubs, Chelsea had to go and buy David Luiz because there was no centre-backs available in the summer. Now, granted, he's been, to be fair, pretty good since he's gone back to Chelsea, but I watched him a lot at PSG last year. And whilst, yes, he's improved, he's always been a good ball-playing centre-back, he's always got a rick in him. And they paid, 30-odd million to get him back, having sold him for 50-odd. There aren't a lot of centre-backs out there. So what do you do if you can't get the finished article? Get them in young, blood them,
right,
and back them. So I would. And if you sign him and he doesn't play, you ship him off to another club for a lot of money. And that's...
I mean, that seems to be the Chelsea, role where you buy everybody and you sell them back at least for what you paid for them. So, I mean, they buy a lot of players that aren't working out, but they rarely lose money on them.
Exactly.
When they move them on. Another specific player, as long as we're still in Ligue 1, from someone whose name you probably recognize, Bobby Chakrabarti.
Oh, yes.
Bob Lex, who asked specifically if you would have Corentin Tolisso from Lyon at Arsenal.
Oh, in a heartbeat. Absolutely. Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful little player. He was, I didn't want to sort of pull him out, the obvious one, because it is a bit obvious to pull out the names that everyone talks about. But yeah, he's a wonderful, wonderful footballer. He's wanted by Napoli. I think Juventus are sniffing now as well. But yeah, I think he's 22, I think, from memory. Certainly sort of younger 20s. He's composed. For me, he's kind of your player that if you wanted to look at a Santi Cazorla, not replacement, because I don't think we're ever going to find a player like Santi, but if you wanted to get a player that's similar, who can adapt, he is that. He's box to box. He's good feet, quick, sort of strong, and there's so much growth in him. And he's a bit of a leader as well. I think he will prove to be a leader in the long run. So, I would. A
lot of good prospects coming through Ligue 1. I mean, you look at it kind of as a prospect league, but there's some good players over there.
Yeah.
And they're not all playing for PSG, that's for sure.
True that.
All right. Well, Dougie had a couple other questions. One is, which is the bigger barrier to lack of Premier League titles the last decade? Overall player mentality or tactical approach to big games, which to me is the old player versus coach debate. And I don't want to rehash too much of what we talked about earlier, but I mean, do you, Andy, kind of place that the fact that we haven't been able to get over that hump on the player mentality or on tactics?
Tactics, 100%. Player mentality, they know going into a match of City versus a Bournemouth, they know where their mind is. I mean, they're professionals, they're getting paid to do it. Tactically, we get just absolutely outclassed every time because we do the same thing in every match. And the few times that we have changed tactics, we've seen positive results. And I coach, I look at this. I look at teams. I see, hey, they're scoring a lot of goals. Hey, we need to change the way we're going to play. Let's go defensive. Let's park the bus and let's play on the counter. And so we don't see it enough from Arsene where we go in and week out and change tactically. I feel like we do the same thing too many times. So yeah, I'm going to go with the tactic route. Kris.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I couldn't add a lot to that, to be honest. It's a great question, I have to say. But yeah, I think the tactical, there's so many changes to how teams set up these days. It's an always evolving game. If you think back to even, people are banging about this 4-3-3 or 3-4-3 at the moment. It's been around for years. It's been in Italy for years. But all of a sudden, an Italian manager comes to England and does it, and everyone's raving about it. So, and that just shows how sometimes tactically inept we are. I think it's only a matter of time before teams start actually inventing formations and trying things differently.
1-1-2-3-2-1.
Yeah, all these things, and ultimately, I'm a great believer that a formation is just a word. Every modern day footballer at the level that Arsenal play at should really be able to do a job in most positions to a level, and every position is fluid as well. Like the strikers move around, the forwards, the wide forwards move different sides to different sides. So, yeah, I think tactics is probably the one to go with on that question.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Dougie. And Doug has a third question, which I'm saving for last, and you'll understand why. Again, our next questioner you may be familiar with, Kris. Someone called Jason Davies, I think it is, who apparently comes from some small country slightly west of England.
Ireland?
No, not that one. We'll keep guessing. He has two questions, and I will allow you to choose one of the two to answer. I have a feeling I know which one it will be. The first question is, what is worse, Kris's new bed sheets or Kris's new haircut? Number two, which you may choose to answer, how does Arsene put a stop to the space we leave behind the midfield? Fair enough, he wants us to win the ball higher up the park, but no matter who we play in midfield, we have left big gaps that other teams exploit. So, Kris, which question will you be answering?
I'll do both, actually. I'll treat Jace. Nothing wrong with my bed sheets. They are pimp. They're very me. I'm loving them. They're actually not on at the moment. They've just been washed, but I've got a nice, lovely sort of red with a swirly pattern on at the moment, which my cats are loving. And there's nothing wrong with my hair. I like to think of myself as sort of a throwback to like Zach from Saved by the Bell, but longer highlights and stuff. So yeah,
he pulled some big, some big.
I've never been a follower of fashion. That's one thing I've never been. I just have
fashion follows you, not the other way around.
Exactly. On the other question, it's one that Jason, I, and Dom and all the guys, we speak about it on our WhatsApp groups, sort of seemingly by the day. I love the cock. I'll put that out there right now.
I can't say that hasn't been said on this podcast 84 times.
Exactly.
It begins.
I really rate him. Now, one thing I will caveat that with, he's not a brilliant passer. He's not a forward midfielder, which is where he's being played at the moment. I don't agree with that. I would like to see Coquelin sat in front of that back four doing that job, as I said earlier, with one or two players either alongside him or in front of him. I think you can play someone just slightly in advance of him to do the high press. I think we've got players like Ramsey, I think could do a high press quite nicely. I think Xhaka's capable of it, although he's not as athletic. And I think that's the reason Coquelin is doing the high press, because he's probably the most athletic of those holding players. El Nene's more of a long stride, ground covering player. Xhaka's more of a bulldozing, physical player. Santi's obviously the technical. He's the player that will just nick in and get a toe in and win the ball away, whereas Coquelin is the one with the mobility to get around the pitch. And Ramsey's the closest one to him with that engine. So I would always have Coquelin in every side that I picked, strongest side personally right now. But he needs to be played in the right role, and I don't think the role that Arsene's using him in this year is one that I'd be keen on myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Andy, anything to add to that?
No, I think that's completely perfect analysis. And the thing with the players that play in a similar style to Coughlin is they are good passers. So even if Coughlin wins a ball and it's a 3-yard pass to Xhaka who pings it 30 or runs forward with it or whatever, we have those players. And you're right, I don't think he's playing in the right position. So yeah, I would definitely have him right in front of those central defensive partnership and just have him take everything that he can get. But that's another gaping hole, Mike, that our coaching side, why aren't our coaches seeing this glaring, obvious issue and saying, okay, how do we fix it?
I don't know. What are you asking me for?
You always have to fill a gaping hole with a strong cock.
Yeah, you do.
So
that's just common sense.
Exactly.
And a lot of people say it's length, but a lot of people also say it's girth. And I feel like Coughlin can get sideline to sideline easiest, and he'll fill the most girth.
Well,
or the ability to get around different areas.
You know?
and stretch the opposing teams.
No matter what hole, the cock will fill it without a problem.
Speaking of hard tissues and soft tissues, okay. Our next question
comes from a woman.
Yes, it comes from our. So I'm going to tell her just to start listening now instead of everything leading up to this point. It comes from pod favorite Becca Rhodes from Iowa, who either owns or runs or both a bakery in her hometown, and she has told us that she listens to our podcast every Monday morning at 5 a.m. while cooking bread and making lovely pastries for the day. So,
nice.
In my mind, I'm envisioning this kind of like from the movie Ghost situation where she's like gently making the bread and Andy and I are crouching behind her, moving her hands on the dough. And oh shit, am I?
That sounds really creepy.
Are we on the air? I forgot we were recording a podcast for a second. All right, so her question is, what do you think our favorite players would be doing for a living if they weren't footballers? And when I asked her, any specific people, she said, no, I want you to pick. So I picked an attacker, a midfielder, and a defender. And it is Alexis, Santi, and Gabrielle. Andy, do you have an idea?
I assume if Alexis wasn't a footballer, he would be carrying large objects on his back because that's what he seems to be doing with our club right now, carrying us single-handedly. So maybe a fireman because they carry heavy things.
Okay, that's good. Kris, any thoughts for Alexis's?
Well, taking away the obvious one of a dog sitter or dog walker, because that is the obvious one. For me, he would be somebody who gets. I'm trying to think of a courier. I don't know if you have it in the US, but we have a thing over here called Deliveroo, which is basically
we
like
have
these
Underoos here, but we don't have Deliveroos.
Well, Deliveroos, they're basically like your favourite takeaways that don't deliver. They have this delivery service. It's a bit like Uber, but for food. And it's basically these people in really badly ill-fitting Lycra suits with bikes, and they have food in their backpack things that they carry on their back, like massive, great heated things. And I can imagine Alexis just dashing around 100 different places every Saturday night delivering food because he just never stops. He'd be back saying, right, where's next? So
we actually do have Uber that delivers food.
Yeah,
here.
it's called Uber Eats now. Yeah,
Uber Eats.
And it's the same. It's the same Uber drivers, and you can order something from a restaurant, and they'll go pick it up for you, and then deliver it to your house.
If we have one more mention, we're going to have to demand a sponsorship. So because
they're soon to sponsor
Wendy
Tottenham.
Sucks.
So
I think that needs to happen.
We can't use Uber at all if they're going to sponsor Tottenham.
Yeah, that's
true.
No. That's true.
True.
So I would.
Although I have a very quickly dilemma, which maybe you can help me out with. I don't know if you guys are big sort of sports brand people, or you have a particular favorite brand you like to wear or not wear. Mm-hmm. I have always been a Nike man, always. And I hear next year that both Spurs and Chelsea are going to have Nike kits. This is disturbing me considerably. I'm not sure what to do about this.
So, Kris, that's so funny you say that because I refuse to wear Under Armour because they are
because of Spurs.
Yeah, no,
I'm the same.
Absolutely refuse. So I'm so happy that this change is coming because I can say I can go to Under Armour now and start wearing their clothing. But ever since Puma took over the sponsorship for Arsenal, I've just gone all Puma.
Yeah, this is it.
I just go all bed sheets because that's the only thing that fits me these days. So. I don't care who makes them, actually.
But it is going to be tough because, Nike is obviously the England sponsor, so I have an England kit. So I'm like, what are you going to do there? I have to go back to the old Umbro days and start rocking those. But
just don't wear an England kit.
It is embarrassing.
I'm coming over in March to watch it, to see him at Wembley. So,
good luck.
So anyway, getting back to Alexis. Yeah, thanks. Getting back, I think it'll be hard to find a ticket.
No.
Alexis would be a golf caddy, so I'm kind of going along with you, Andy, in the sense that he'd be carrying things around. When you have a 150-yard approach shot, he would like run all the way up to the green and back twice just to let you know the right angle. I mean, when you don't break 100, he'd storm off the golf course and drop your clubs all over the green, and then probably sign with another golfer. But yeah, I think he'd be a good golf caddy. Kris, what do you think about Santi Cazorla? What would he be doing?
He'd be a professional burglar. Allow me to explain. Quietest feet in football, Danny has often said Santi is, or has. So I imagine him in full balaclava and black sort of overall garb, much akin to Mr. Bean in the first Johnny English film. Just sort of gently pitter-pattering around museums, stealing very expensive items from museums and jewelry shops and places like that. So, yeah, I think he'd be a brilliant professional cat burglar because he'd never get caught.
Yeah, and he could sneak through those little cracks that like usually only mice can go through, like in the floorboard. So, yeah, excellent. Yeah. Good one. Andy.
I envision him owning, much like our pod Becca, owning a dough kind of shop, like I'm thinking pizza, where he just is throwing pizzas in the air and spinning dough. I don't know why, but Chris's answer was way better than mine.
Well, because I kind of picture him being like that, but he's like Spanish, not Italian though. But he would just be like
I still see him just doing the whole like the pepperoni.
Yeah, exactly.
But in a Spanish accent, doing an Italian accent.
Exactly. I think he would be a good jockey. I mean, he's perfect to be riding a horse. I could see him winning the Kentucky Derby or Epsom Oaks or whatever race you want to call it. So the size is fine. You have to be under 115 pounds, I think, to be a jockey or something like that. So he fits. Gabriel, I'll start with this one. He would work at a haunted house as one of those guys that come out of the dark and scare the shit out of you. That's what I think he would be doing for a living, and especially with the blood that he had yesterday, just kind of bleeding out of all of his orifices. Just here I am, I'm Gabriel. So that's what I would have him do. What do you think, Andy?
I see him working as like a mafioso's number one like hitman, where he just like has to go collect or break some kneecaps. You just him walking into a room, you're like, oh fuck, this guy means business.
This thing just got ugly.
Yeah, totally.
Kris,
I couldn't separate the two here. So the first one I've gone with is a UFC fighter. Because you look at like the shape of his face, and when you see like a lot of these Brazilian fighters,
yep,
and they all look like they've had really hard. It's like, oh, my cat's being sick, how lovely. Really hard sort of upbringing, and in the favelas and stuff. I could definitely imagine him as a UFC fighter. And the other answer, I've gone blank. There was another answer I had. Oh yes, he'd be a life model for an H.R. Giger painting. I can imagine him as some sort of twisted kind of Necronom type of feature thing.
Furiously typing away on Google right now to find out what that means.
Think of the film Alien. All the artwork that was done, that was H.R. Giger, the Swiss artist. So I can imagine Gabriel some sort of twisted, kind of weird-looking creature that was a life drawing for someone. So
poor Gabriel, man.
Poor Gabriel.
Good, as we've seen recently. Very, very good soul. But first of all, learn some fucking English, and second of all, Sorry, but you're not, you're no Olivier Giroud, and we're going to keep reminding you of that because we're dicks. Finally, a final question back to Dougie Cazorla again. By the way, Dougie, I'll give you a plug because you are fantastic to us, and we want to be to you as well. He writes an amusing blog for the Syracuse Gooners at CuseGooners, C-U-S-E, Gooners.com/blogs. And he asks, and may be writing about soon, what is your favorite WWE finisher of all time, Andy? And which Arsenal player would use it in their wrestling career? So, Andy, what is your answer to that, being the WWE fan that you are?
So let's keep in mind that the podcast is running long here, gents. The only WWE person that I remember, that I know outside of being like a teenage kid that used to watch it, and I think you mentioned him earlier on the pod, was The Rock.
Okay.
Was that right when Kris had mentioned?
No, that was Brett. Yeah.
Oh, well then there
Bret
we go.
Hart.
I don't know what WWE finisher means. So
he knows. He's
no, I don't.
He's got a reputation of. All right. Well, I didn't expect an answer from you anyway. So, Kris, what do you think?
Well, it's definitely the first part of the question, that like the favorite finisher of all time. I was just a massive Bret Hart mark as a kid. Bret was my guy growing up, and although you've got the modern day era, there's some pretty cool people there as well. Bret Hart has to be my all-time favorite, so I'd have to have the sharpshooter as my finisher.
Now, which Arsenal player would be having people tap out to that?
See, that's the tough one, you see, because you've got to have... I mean, I suppose my favourite player is Santi, and I imagine he'd be able to sort of twist you into different positions with the sort of ability he has to be able to move his feet quickly and into little different positions. So I suppose Per Mertesacker would be the obvious one, though, wouldn't it? Because he's so damn gangly.
That's true. So, yeah, got to get those legs wrapped around to pull that off.
Yeah.
Well, I would... by the way, this is an announcement. Big news. Kris and I. This is big news to Kris too. Kris and I are starting our wrestling hipsters podcast.
Can you imagine?
On Monday nights at 4 a.m. after Raw ends. So I got to go with the People's Elbow from The Rock because it was so ridiculously non-impactful. It was basically just involved a guy who was pretty much unconscious, lying in the middle of the ring. The Rock just dancing around for 3 minutes, just rolling off of the ropes and just then falling on the guy with your elbow. So considering all the dancing, I'd have to say Giroud would be perfect for that. He'd go kicking his leg up behind him and jumping on people's backs and then just fall on the guy and 1, 2, 3.
Imagine Gabrielle with the claw, the Mick Foley. Can imagine that, can't you? Just
I would be very, very afraid if Gabrielle stuck his hand in my mouth.
Yes, me too.
With a sock on it or not, but
yeah. What was on the sock?
Well, exactly. Excellent questions, excellent answers. Thank you. No Arsene game this week. Kris, are you familiar with the Arsene game?
I've listened to your last 4 or 5 podcasts now, so
I think we've been taking a break from it. It's Andy's least favorite game. I do an awful impression of Arsene Wenger, giving 3 quotes, 2 of which are real quotes, 1 of which I completely make up, and I just get it every single time, knock it out of the park. It's an amazing game, but I mean, no one has any clue how expensive it is to put together an Arsene game. I mean, you got to hire French accent tutors. You don't just go from saying hamstring to hamstring overnight. I mean, it's an acquired thing that takes a lot of practice. And, the group of people I have to hire to cull through thousands of hours of press conference footage. So we've kind of taken a break from it. But one of these next few podcasts where we have a guest and a 1-game week, we will pull it out. So sorry to disappoint, Andy. Hater of that game.
I'm so glad that we covered the time we would have used there with the WWE question.
Exactly. Yeah. No one ever said I was.
I do have to ask Mike who's going to win the Rumble because I couldn't come on this podcast and not ask him that question.
Oh well, it's kind of got to be either Goldberg or Feinberg or Brock Lesnar. So I'd have to say I'm going to go with Goldberg.
The goalie from the Mighty Ducks team.
Goldberg, because he's the one Jewish wrestler, I think, in WWE, and I got to support my people.
See, I think
you're Jewish.
You'd never know that when we talked about my son's bar mitzvah for 9 straight weeks.
See, I'm putting out there. I'm saying Chris Jericho wins it.
Oh, I certainly hope so. I certainly hope so. And
the magician.
By the way, it was just, it made my freaking week when you did the Chris Jericho thing on the podcast a few weeks ago. You knew it would, and it did.
I'm glad.
Excellent. So, Premier League overview. That Chelsea Spurs game. A lot of controversy, at least on Twitter and here in the U.S. in the groups that I talk in about what outcome people should root for. So I did a poll. Which would you prefer happens? And this was actually after the game, so it was more like which would you have preferred happens? Tottenham lose because it's Tottenham and God damn it, they need to lose, or a tie, or Chelsea or Spurs winning because it actually keeps us closer to Chelsea in the table. And we got 3% of people saying they wanted Spurs to lose no matter what, but a lot of discussion from people who were adamant that is the correct answer. A lot of hardcore North London lifetime gooners basically saying, forget the table, forget Chelsea, forget whatever. You never root for Spurs to win. And I get that. 71% said a draw because it kind of picks up maximum points. It gives us the ability to pick up 2 points on both teams. And then 21% said they wanted Spurs to win, which they should be embarrassed of themselves, and 5% voted for Joey Murphy. So, Joey, there's your plug. What do you think about that, Kris? Are you in the camp of never root for Spurs no matter what the table looks like?
Yeah, 100%. I was brought up 5 minutes from Highbury, so I'm very much Arsenal all the way. Anything Spurs is always the worst result possible. So yeah, no, it's always anything but Spurs. Are
you surprised at how, in the modern day supporter, and this wasn't just in the U.S., this was, open on Twitter, so I'm sure we got answers from all over the place, but are you surprised at how few people actually came out that way?
Not really. No, not really. I think even our own Jeff Arsenal has said a few times that he hates Chelsea almost as much as, if not more than Spurs these days. So, no, I don't think so. Because again, you have to appreciate the modern fan doesn't necessarily grow up in the 70s, 80s. You supported the team you grew up near. That was how it was. Right. Nowadays, people grow up. You get English people supporting Barcelona or PSG now. So, no, I'm not hugely surprised. And I should say as well, neither should you be criticised if you feel that way. It's just that I was always brought up. Even if a player is brilliant at Spurs, he will never be brilliant in my eyes. He'll always be overrated. Doesn't matter how good he is.
Right, which actually there's a lot of discussion about in one of our groups about, would you take Pochettino at Arsenal? And, there's that same sentiment of I don't care what he's done there or what he's in the process of doing there. Never.
No, I wouldn't. And irrespective of it, and it's not just the manager, I wouldn't take any Spurs player either. I know people say, if you could have one Spurs player, who would you sign? A lot of people say Lloris. I wouldn't have any of them. Nah, not for me.
Fuck them.
Yep.
All right, pickems. Andy, guess what's happened?
Eric is still running the numbers, Mike, so it's
Eric,
weird how all of a sudden you've gone from being 40 points behind to now almost tied.
40 points behind. I am on a roll here. I'm not going to get relegated. I'm telling you. Yeah, Andy is so bitter about this. He has one of his henchmen in Chicago doing review. He's listening to all 22 of our podcasts to listen back to the picks to make sure that my accounting is correct. But have you uncovered any massive corruption in the Pick'ems department of the podcast
I haven't asked Eric yet. I haven't talked to him, but he is very much like he's the closest friend I have to Gabrielle. Even though he's a very attractive man, he has the might and wrath of Gabrielle's anger, and he will come down on you hard, Mike. He will come on you hard.
You will find nothing.
Let's just go to this picks of the week. This is where I rebound.
Yeah, about the scores. Andy, 45 points for the season going into match day 21. Our guest spot has also gone on a bit of a tear lately, thanks to Danny Carbassiun's 10-pointer a couple weeks ago. 45 points, tied, and Mike at 44. So I am breathing down your neck.
I don't like it.
Literally breathing on your neck. All right, so our shit game of the week this week. I just realized I forgot to do picks, so I'm going to do these live. which means I'm going to lose. West Brom at Spurs. Shit game of the week. Andy.
With Spurs playing the way they are, I'm going to say it's going to be 3-0 Spurs.
Okay. Now, Kris, does your hatred go to picks, or do you do a reverse jinx? What do we do here?
No, I'm comfortable with predicting outcomes. Sadly, Spurs 2-1. I think it'd be closer than people think, but yeah, Spurs will. Well, they should win this, really. Sadly.
Yeah, I mean, West Brom at home. Unless you're Arsenal, you don't even make that close. So, Chelsea at Leicester. Andy.
Aren't you going to pick Mike? Did you just do that?
Oh, yeah, I wrote it down, and then I didn't say it. 2-0 to Spurs. That's part of my cheating strategy is to is to not say it on the podcast. 2-0 to Spurs. Chelsea at Leicester. Andy.
I'm going to go with Leicester helping us out, and they're going to do a Man City on them, and I'm going to say 2-1 Leicester.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
Leicester at home, starting to put it together again. Kris, what do you think?
Chelsea comfortably 4-1.
4-1 Chelsea. Yeah, and I'm going to go with 3-0 to Chelsea because I want to pick up a point on you, Andy. Man City at Everton. Andy.
City at Everton. I'm going to go 2-0 City.
Okay. And as usual, no details there?
Nope.
No genitalia-based details?
Nope.
All right. Kris, what do you say?
Everton are not convincing. 3-1 to City. I actually think Everton will take the lead, but City will have too much for them second half.
That seems to be happening a lot this season. The favorite team going behind early and then coming back to take it comfortably. I don't know why, but I will go with 1-1 in that game. I see a strange outcome there. Lukaku and one of the Jesuses will score for Everton or for Man City. Liverpool at Man United. The game of the week, I would imagine. I'm sure this is where our good friend Arlo will be focused.
Don't bring his name up on this pod, Mike. I'm gonna go.
Kris, do you know Arlo White, or do you know of him?
I do, yeah.
Well,
he's the American commentator, isn't he? And
I mean, he's British, but he commentates.
Unfortunately, he does.
Yeah, I think I first came across him. I'm quite a follower of MLS, and I think I first came across him on that post show. And he wasn't very complimentary of my Chicago Fire lads. Although, to be fair, they are terrible. So he was probably right on that occasion.
He's not very complimentary of my Andy Rhodes either. But all right, so Liverpool at Man United.
I'm sorry that Arlo doesn't like to be told that he's not good at what he does, Mike. Okay.
I'm perfectly fine being told that about me.
Right. There's some people that don't like what I do at my job, but, constructive criticism, Arlo.
Exactly.
Sack of shit. Let's go Liverpool at Man United 2-2.
You always have to take it one step too far. All right, Liverpool at Man U. Kris?
A disappointing pool. 1-1 or 2-1 United? I'll go 1-1. Yeah, I'll go 1-1, I think.
Okay. And I will go with 3-2 to United. Liverpool's just starting to kind of show some signs of teetering a little bit. Just a little bit. Arsenal at Swansea, our final game of the week. Andy, what do you think?
Ooh, 3-0 Arsenal.
Now, this is an away game for Arsenal, I believe, as Bob Bradley would say.
Swansea always kind of do us, though, but I'm going to go 3-0 Arsenal. They're just one of those teams where I feel like we always kind of, this is the comeback. This starts the comeback, 3-0.
Okay. Your comeback or Arsenal's comeback?
Everyone's comeback.
All right, Kris, what do you think?
3-1. Again, I don't back us for a clean sheet, sadly. I think we'll go into a 2-0 lead and be comfortable, ship one to let them back in as usual, and then tie it up later on with the third. So, I'll go 3-1.
All right, and I will get back to my reverse jinxes. I'll go with 2-2 and hope that I lose a point there. So speaking of Swansea, any thoughts about what you'd expect out of that team? Are they just, have they just given up? Are they ripe for the picking for everybody, or are they going to start to show some fight with their new manager, Kris?
New manager bounce, yeah. I mean, Paul Clement didn't have a brilliant time at Derby, but I think it's probably unfair to judge him because he was under quite a lot of scrutiny when he took that job and was sort of demanded on high as certain transfers and players he was picking and whatnot. So, mixed messages, I think, there. I do expect them to have a new manager bounce. That result at Palace was really unexpected. I think that will give them the bonus. I think the bottom line is our squad is better and we have better players. So if we turn up, and we're at it, then I can't see us not getting a result. But that said, it is one of those games, like you say, if it's pissing with rain and it's a late overcast day and, we don't start well, it's got the lookings of a banana skin. But no, I think Swansea will be better, but I still expect us to win it fairly comfortably.
Does Rob Holding get a start finally, or are we going to keep with Mustafi and Gabriel again?
I think we'll keep with Mustafi and Gabriel, sadly, if Koz's injury is as serious as is being talked about. I would be quite keen on seeing Rob Holding, but Callum Chambers almost had his career finished at Swansea that year, didn't he? So maybe it's a bit of a risk to put Rob Holding in. But no, I think Holding will probably play the next FA Cup game if we get a home draw against the Leicester team at the Emirates. I think he'll play that. So I think that's what Arsenal's got in his mind. But Gabriel Mustafi seems to be the way forward. So let's just hope it improves.
Excellent. So. Andy, we've continued to rampage into new countries like a venereal disease.
It's the only way we know how to rampage.
Exactly. There are no other ways. This week we added 4 new countries. We have this software, Kris, I don't know if you guys do as well, that you can kind of see where your downloads are coming from.
Yes, I put it on SoundCloud on the Hipsters. I like to do that occasionally. Yeah, it's good fun.
And it just tickles me to think that there's actually like one person in these random countries, or this one person in Cyprus that we know that listens to us 27 times a week, and we love her. But so we're up to 53 countries, which is weird because we only have 54 listeners. But welcome to the listeners.
I said that last week, and Mike got so mad. He's like, "Great, now everyone thinks we only have 50 listeners." He's like, "But I guess we have 49 countries listening, so that doesn't really make sense."
Yeah, that's how I talk. Yeah. So anyway, we want to just welcome our new listeners from our 50th country, which was actually Russia. So either Putin is starting to spy on us now, or maybe it was Arshavin that was listening. But whoever it was, thank you for that. Cameroon. So thank you, Samuel Eto'o.
That's blatantly Alex's song.
That was my other one. Other one. Either that or Roger Milla.
Oh, legend.
But the third one was Panama, and I can only assume that was Van Halen, listening from Panama. And lastly, in our 53rd country is Switzerland.
The Xhaka brothers.
Xhaka brothers, either that or Cesaro.
Or Johan Juru.
Yeah, or Senderos.
Nice. Senderos. Send him somewhere. So we're steamrolling our way to our 100th country, and we've made a pledge that whatever our 100th country is, if we ever reach that far, we will podcast live from there. So I'm definitely looking for either Tahiti or Hawaii, which I still haven't learned is not a country. So, Kris, thank you very, very much. Would you like to, or please let us know how to, if we're not already listening to your podcast or communicating with you on Twitter, how do we do that?
If you want to join the merry band, feel free. I am at AFC Freddy 8, Freddy FREDDIE number 8, the number that is. Feel free to. I'm usually pretty good at interacting with people as long as you're nice and polite and when I've got the time. And of course, a Bergkamp Wonderland at the AFC podcast on Twitter, and at the FH podcast is the Football Hipsters podcast, which I enjoy very much, and I'm about to record another episode of in a very short while.
Excellent. Well, we will be tuning into that. And one quick selfish plug. If anyone in the range of our voices that listens to this is capable of helping out with with either 2 or 3 or however many away tickets for Palace on April 8th, I will be over there and we'll be hunting for away tickets. I know that's not an easy one to get. So if anyone is in the know or please reach out to us on Twitter or email and let me know. It would be greatly, greatly appreciated. We'll try to do something nice for you if we can. So other than that, please review our podcast on iTunes. Listen to Kris and his various online podcasts that he does, which he just mentioned, and looking forward to another good week. One game.
Thanks, Kris.
It's a pleasure. I'm really happy to join you guys anytime.
Fantastic. Come on, you Gooners.